Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so impressed. Everybody was on time. This is a great Minnesota audience. So we're going to go ahead and start. Hello, everybody, and I want to thank you for coming to our program this afternoon. I'm Jennifer Komar Olivarez, Head of Exhibition Planning and Strategy here at MIA, and I'm incredibly pleased, along with my colleague who's in the front row, Andreas Marks, a Mary Griegsberg Curator of Japanese and Korean Art and Director of the Clark Center for Japanese Art. Andreas, raise your hand. To welcome you to the two new exhibitions featuring the collection of Tamara and Michael Root. The exhibitions, the Root Collection, celebrating studio ceramics in the Cargill Gallery on the first floor, and the Root Collection, Living with Japanese Ceramics, in galleries 251, 252, and 253, just over to the left as you exit the Pillsbury Auditorium, feature selections from the Root Collection in the areas of North American and European and Japanese ceramics. And we're so fortunate that these works are generous promise gifts to MIA from the Roots who are here with us today. So I have two quick but unrelated announcements. One, I just want to make sure that you know that today is the last day for you to see Caravaggio's Judith and Holofernes, which is here on loan and is on view in the Bell Family Decorative Arts Court just above us on the third floor. And then for design aficionados, I want to mention that this is an auspicious day for this conversation. It's 150 years since the birth of Eliel Saarinen, the Finnish architect, and also 113 years since the birth of his son, Eero Saarinen. So they share a birthday, August 20th. So that makes me very happy for the timing of this talk today. So now, to celebrate the exhibition openings, I'm very pleased to be here with Minneapolis artist Maren Kloppmann, whose work Wall Pillow with Cutouts is featured in the exhibition in Cargill. Maren was born in Germany and received her journeyman degree in 1984 from the Bavarian Keramik Handwerkskammer, and then came to the US to continue her studies in ceramics. After artisan residencies in North Carolina and Michigan, she received her BFA at the Kansas City Art Institute in 1993 and her MFA at the University of Minnesota in 1996. And she's been a full-time studio artist since 1997. Her grants and awards include 3 McKnight Fellowships, a Jerome Fellowship, and 5 Minnesota State Arts Board grants. And her work is represented in numerous private and museum collections, including the Crocker Museum of Art in Sacramento, the Frederick R. Weissman Art Museum, the Herberger Museum of Art and Design in Tempe, Arizona, the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art in Kansas City, and of course, MIA. Maren ventured into abstract ceramic wall sculpture in 2013 after a 17-year career in functional ceramics, and she's now known for her multi-part architectonic wall sculptures. Taking stimulus from modernist architecture and concepts of minimalism, Maren describes her process and style as, quote, a visual confluence of serendipity and precision, where intuition and intention intersect. She's very attentive to how space, environment, light, and shadow intersect with her works in a given interior. The Wall Pillows work that's on view in the Cargill Gallery, I hope you see it if you haven't seen the exhibition yet after this presentation. It's an early example of Maren's non-functional porcelain wall sculptures. And the Roots' early support of this sculptural work, along with another wall piece in the same 2010 show, purchased from Circa Gallery, helped encourage Maren's move away from functional ceramics. So their decision to purchase Maren's new work at that moment was pivotal. So it just goes to show how important patrons and collectors are. So we're going to hear more about this journey. And so I want you to please join me in welcoming Maren Kloppmann. So we're going to have some questions to guide the discussion, and then we hope to have about 10 or 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. So that's our goal. So Anna, who's helping with the program, is going to help me stay on time. So Maren, hi.
Hi, and Jennifer, thank you so much. It's a big honor to be here. It's a big honor to be part of this exhibition and part of this conversation.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you, and we've had a lot of fun putting this together. So I'm going to start with the slides here. So you've been committed to ceramics since your early studies at the Bavarian Ceramic Handwerkskammer. Can you describe your early and enduring connection with clay?
Yes. I started my journey in clay in a pink overall, hand dyed in the bathtub at home to the chagrin of my mother. So I spent 3 years in a very traditional pottery in Bavaria. In fact, the plates you see behind me there on the wall in the shelf, that was the kind of ceramics that we were three apprentices, one master potter, and we were basically trained to learn how to make that. So we really learned traditional work, traditional techniques. Those 3 years were not about developing your own work. That's the big difference, I think, with traditional European apprenticeships to being here in America and going to school and doing residencies. So I mentioned my mother. She was also then really pivotal in what happened next, because once I graduated, and Jennifer, we could put on the next slide, which also shows this workshop again. And so we were doing vessel, we were doing dinnerware, and also these tiles for Kachelofen, the traditional Bavarian fireplaces. So once I graduated with my journeyman degree, my mom gave me a ticket as a gift to visit my aunt and cousins in Iowa City. And that was in 1984. And of course, I've been back many times to Germany, but I never moved back again. I basically was so lucky to just meet so many mentors and teachers along the way that kept suggesting the next program. So Jennifer mentioned it a little bit from Iowa City. So I actually worked with a German potter, which was perfect because she helped me to learn all the English words. And because she started clay in America, I in turn taught her all the German words. So I spent a year with her assisting in her shop, and then someone at the University of Iowa suggested for me to go to Penland School of Crafts. So there was a non-academic program where I was able to work for the school in trading free classes and room and board. And I spent 2 years there. And it was only way later on when I went to Kansas City Art Institute and so forth. I mean, in Penland, I studied with Michael Simon, Ron Myers, Sandy Simon, just to name a few. Now, I understand not everyone in this audience is familiar with those names, but they are basically formed the canon of contemporary ceramics. And they were also the artists that were really pushing technique and going away from the wheel and making a lot of work that was not circular and that was not round, or that started on the wheel and then was altered. So I spent 2 years Penland School of Crafts. That there was such a gift to have been guided there. One of my teachers there was Mary Ream. Some of you might be familiar with her. She is no longer working in ceramics. She started a residency program in Detroit, literally in the inner city. So moving from the Blue Ridge Mountains in the country to the inner city of Detroit was an incredible experience as a juxtaposition. And really also learning about the variety of American culture. But so I did that residency program again for about 2 years, and it was Mary Ream who said, you know, you're doing good, you have a good background, but you could be so much better. You've got to go to art school, and you've got to go and study with Ken Ferguson, Kansas City Art Institute. So I went to Kansas City to interview with them, and Ken took me under his wing, and I spent actually 4 years there, going all the way back into the foundation year, which was so important in hindsight to really just learn the very basics of art education and what art can really offer. And once I was finished with that, I thought, okay, now I'm 31 years old, but I only have my undergrad degree. So I might as well tack on another 3 years. And that's how I came to Minneapolis to go to graduate school. And it was actually Randy Johnston, Professor Emeritus from River Falls, Wisconsin, who was teaching our third year, our junior year in Kansas City, which was a magical semester when he came in the spring. And it was because of him that I looked in this direction. And so we go to the next image. So it's obviously quite a juxtaposition from where I started. So this is basically work I was making after graduate school. And again, for those who are familiar with some of the aesthetics that especially developed around here and the St. Croix Potters community. So there's very much Jeff Oestreich and Mark Ferris in this work, obviously. And of course, Mark Ferris was my teacher and advisor in graduate school.
And it's fun that we have Ken Ferguson,
Yes.
Mark Ferris, Randy Johnston are all featured in the exhibition downstairs.
And Jeff as well, yeah.
So kind of thinking about other influences. So the Root exhibition in Cargill attempts to highlight some of those who defined studio ceramics in the 20th century in Europe and North America, including many emigres during World War II. And they helped pave the way for further experimentation over the last few decades. So who do you count among your biggest inspirations from the modernist era?
Yes, there is for sure Ruth Duckworth, whose work I really became familiar with and discovered at the Kansas City Art Institute. And I just really loved the focus on form, the focus on space, and to have such a very specific way of using the visual plethora that you can use of creating a form in terms of totally void of decoration and making a vessel, but it's not functional. So, I mean, for me at that point, excuse me, for me at that point, being in school and, you know, learning some of the basics beyond making traditional pottery, that just really blew my mind. And also her, the way she really chose porcelain for its purity and its visual simplicity and its feel. And it was many years before I came to that point, but I ultimately ended up for the same reasons to choose porcelain. And I will get back to Ruth a little bit later with this question, but I want to go next to Betty Woodman, who...
Well, I just wanted to mention, actually, for those who aren't so familiar with this type of work, that both of these are in the show. The teapot and the accessories are early functional work. And we had the Ruth Duckworth exhibition here in 2006. She was still alive. She didn't want any of that functional work in the show. So it's quite rare to find, but it does show how she was exploring, as Maren said, these shapes, these forms, it's being very, sensuous just in the functional works that she was creating before she started to work more in porcelain, though she continued to work in stoneware. We have a stoneware plaque also in the exhibition. And the cup and blade looks humongous on the screen, but it's actually not very big. It's a tabletop object.
Yeah, it's the size of the hand.
Yes. Here's Betty Woodman.
Yes, which is, so this is a great juxtaposition. Now, Betty Woodman, from an aesthetic point of view, it never really, I would deem her an influence, but Betty was actually a resident, artist in resident at a college in Kansas when I was at Kansas City Art Institute. So it's the early 1990s, a fairly young Betty Woodman, just working in the shop, and we were allowed to just all pile in and ask questions and watch her work. And she was starting to make those pillow pictures. And it's so funny because I ended up doing wall pillows, and at some point I stopped and thought, wait, is that where I heard that the first time? Like you could turn a vessel into a pillow. But I also love, so Betty was such an impressive inspiration because of, her career was tenacious. And she ultimately was probably, I think, one of the very few, if not only, women in ceramics that had a solo show at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which my husband and I went to see. And it was just really impressive, and really getting into installation work, and considering a space and setting up the work accordingly, or even developing it. But the other thing I want to point out here for the layperson is the way she, of course, uses expressive decoration and color. And again, Ruth Duckworth she was completely on the other spectrum. So those were things that I started becoming aware of going to art school in Kansas City, and that was such a pivotal experience.
And this piece isn't in the exhibition because it's part of the Smithsonian's collection, but there is a wall-mounted picture that has the same expressive approach. That's downstairs in the Cargill show.
And really leaving a mark, it's not all like the seams, because this is constructed, are not all, nicely done. The leaving the mark of the hand in the process is part of the expression. And Ruth was the opposite. And I ultimately kind of went down the Ruth Duckworth path. I really like erasing all the marks of the hand. So going back to the idea of some of the influences, my foundation teacher, the late Yoshiko Zato in Kansas City, she was actually, we were the same age. I was in my late 20s when I started undergrad school. And Yoshiko had just graduated from Cooper Union with an architecture degree. So she was really on a very different level in her development, and she was becoming a teacher. And she was amazing to teach and talk about space, and just to understand that space can just be a concept that you embrace to create sculptures. So she actually made me aware of Isamu Noguchi's work. What's interesting, so Ruth, because there's so many layers to this. Ruth Duckworth was from Germany, went to Britain during the war, fleeing from Germany, and then ending up in the United States. Isamu Noguchi had a Japanese father and an American mother, so he had to combine two cultures as well. And I do think, I ultimately, thought about that in my own path, that really has an impact, that really has you grow up one way, and then it kind of morphs over time, and you end up maybe maturing as an artist in a different culture, and that shows in its expression. So the next Noguchi, what fascinated me about him is that he was really, he wrote and talked about how space can be expressed, spatial qualities as a visual aspect in form. And he worked with these are actually, I think this is quite flat, flat aluminum sheets, but obviously created a three-dimensional form. And he also, maybe not intentionally when he made that, but his work really made me more aware of shadow. And basically having a solid and having a void. There's actually, there's a lot of stuff going on in this work. And at the same time, he's using very few visual elements to create that expression. And it's abstract. It's not, we start wanting to see something in an abstract work because we want to relate to it. We want to make it relatable to the world we know. But I was really fascinated how he just arranged visual elements and then expressed spatial concepts. So another big influence also I became aware of Constantin Brancusi, the grandfather of modernist sculpture. And by the way, Isamu Noguchi, I think I read that, was the only apprentice that Brancusi ever accepted. And Brancusi was from Romania, ultimately ending up in Paris. Here we go again. Yes, really over a span of an artist's life, ultimately combining two different cultures. So Constantin Brancusi coined the term the essence of form, because he was really about how much can you take away and still express a lot. And his work, and also going back to just the idea of totally void of decoration, really void of marks, although what he did is he combined, the base is actually concrete. So he combined non-traditional materials with marble. Sculpture, was at some point a marble and bronze, and he really started using different materials and juxtapose them.
And I have to say, I'm seeing those biomorphic connections.
Yes.
With your work.
Oh, well. Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, this is the last one that we have for this.
Yeah. So Hans Koper. So I'm kind of want to go back a little bit. First of all, he also, if I look at, when I look at Brancusi and I look at Noguchi and I look at Duckworth, they have such a kinship in their expression. And, they were artists that developed at different times. But so Hans Koper, just like Ruth Duckworth, also was from Hamburg, from northern Germany. And I grew up not far from there. So these artists also ended up really influencing me when I had moved to Minnesota and set up studio after graduate school. I really looked at the St. Croix potters as a model. My idea was to, and I was living in Stillwater at that point. I was flying Warren McKenzie's outdoor salt kiln, and I thought that was then the next goal. You purchase land, you build kilns, and you build your own compound. But I realized there was an American model, and kind of revisiting these artists, I thought, no, wait a minute. And I was also looking at Lucy Ree, and they created urban studios. There was not really a model here with all the great studios you can visit. There wasn't really a good urban one. But I realized I missed being in the city. I missed the structures of the city. I missed the sound of the city. And, just having everything in one studio. I remember reading how Lucy Ree would use her kiln in her London studio as a wedging board. With other words, No, you didn't need all that space. You didn't need all these different buildings. So I kind of wanted to wrap this question up by this, that it was aesthetic, but it was also really a career choice in how a studio can function, and how you can start creating that world. So they were highly influential in that, and even if you think of Brancusi, unfortunately we didn't put that in. I mean, they're great pictures of his studio space, right? And that just kind of like became his whole environment of operations.
Well, and even Ruth Duckworth had a urban studio in Chicago when she came to the US.
Yes.
All right. So understanding that there was a path from functional to sculptural ceramics, what finally helped you make that leap after 17 years of creating? Many of us have in our own collections some of your modern geometric but yet organic functional pots. Like this.
It's really great to have this image here, and when we were going through the slides and I looked at that and I was like, oh wow, there's Randy Johnston. So Randy was, like I said before already, a pivotal teacher, and so he really taught these techniques of hand building. So I did a lot of work on the wheel, and then the hand building started to kind of merge together with that. And so that was very influenced by Randy's aesthetic, and you can kind of see this is salt fired, or maybe even comes out of his wood kiln, but in the salt chamber. So it's a subtle surface, but you can also see kind of a more gesture in the rim. I was really trying to get away from the mark making and the gesture, and which had become very very popular. And in art school, we were outdoing each other, like how many marks we could leave and it would still work. But I secretly wanted to get away from that. I was slowly feeling my way to a more minimal approach. So if you go to the next slide, so my oval platters really kind of morphed into this, because again, I was bringing back in these ideas of space. So the foot, for example, of course, was its own space. It had a function, to hold the platter up. But I thought if you enclose that foot from the bottom, then you can open it up, and then you have your space. So it was starting to turn a functional form into a form that was about conceptual and sculptural space. So some of this translated then to the vases, and you can see here again I trying to go away from really color and mark making, but nonetheless having some subtle marks on it. And that was also something I think that I really saw in both Randy Johnston and Mark Ferris's work also. And by the way, these little cutout things, that really was something that Randy started us on in Kansas City. It was basically enclosing a form, and then how much openings do you need to let, well, the way he would talk about it, let the spirit out of the piece. And I always thought about it to allow my eye. Of course, I can't get in that little hole, but my eye can. So my imagination is going straight in there. And of course, it's also so this is still a vase, and you can see the little bulge above the lower window, and that's where I fit in another slab, because that meant there was another sculptural space underneath, but it would still hold water.
It will still hold water.
Yeah. And it was the idea to enclose, to just consistently enclosing, but I still had that opening that I could say it's a vase, because look, you could fit a flower in there if you wanted to.
But I like that you see that your eye goes there, because it's the
Yes.
same when we see the wall pillows with cutouts that are downstairs in the
Yes.
Cargill show. That's
Yeah.
the same, you know, that's
Mhm.
it makes your eye go to those little slits.
Well, it's really interesting when you fully enclose a form. So I was really trying to figure out what it meant to make sculpture. And this pillow vessel, I called it. So, and this is, by the way, intentional. Do you see that left hand dark opening? So again, it's a vase. It can be used as a vase, but it's cut in an angle. So depending on how it sits, it really just also becomes a visual mark. It becomes a visual mark that, and I think maybe if you've seen the show, if you've seen those wall pillows, in a certain way, well, I guess we'll see the image. Those little openings, some people see them as lines. They don't even see that they are open. So anyway, so I also kind of try to referencing the vessel again, but really trying to figure out the sculptural qualities of it, and that it didn't need to be a functional, it doesn't need to have a function. So the other thing here is we started out early seeing a blade vessel by Ruth Duckworth, and that's also in the show. I was so fascinated by her work and by these blade vessels. In grad school, I actually made one of her pieces. I really copied it. And when it was done, only I got to see it, and then I smashed it. I put the hammer to it, because I literally thought, you know, you can't just take an idea like that and, you know, try to replicate it. And I thought, if I make it and my body and my hands know how that felt, then I can move beyond it. So, you know, it's funny because I see, just go back one moment here, no, to this one, the pillow vessel, because this blade idea, I ultimately thought, well, you know, it could work to actually have a volume there. So because her blades are, you know, they're flat. And so this is I basically created two pillows, as I call them, and cut them open and put them together in a way so they balance each other out. And so this is really a puffy volume. In the vase, you can see that the black wing, if you will, really, you know, becomes visually maybe closer to a blade, but it actually holds a volume. So I kept trying to figure out how to get to just sculpture. Pots are, of course, for pedestal and for table. So that was really the next development, to create table pillows. I always had it in the back of my mind. I wanted to get to the wall, but there had to be, you know, a slow process and steps. And so here you can see also another great example of creating these openings, and just they are becoming a visual mark, depending on what distance you have to the piece. In the photograph, you know, they literally, I mean, I basically brushed in black glaze. And otherwise, just to focus on the edge, the edge of these forms that become a visual line again. And you can see the process of scraping. It's totally hand built. It's not slip cast. So that was kind of part of my mark making trying to erase all the mark making, but just leaving enough that you can see the hand was in there.
Well, I have to say, just looking at it from here, and it looks huge, which it's not, but kind of the transformation of the materiality from something that's very hard to something that looks very soft.
Yes. So there came a point where I was making vessel and functional pots, and ultimately started with the wall works. So I had wanting to create a story of how I could carve out time and also get some monetary support. I applied for a state arts grant for a functional sabbatical. That's how I called it. So I was making, I would get going on a wall piece, and then someone would call me up and say, "Oh, can you make me, a dozen plates?" Yes, I would make a dozen plates, but I would have to put the other project on hold. So I decided I need a story. I need to say, oh, this is what happened. This is how I'm going to do this now. So I applied for the grant, and it was fantastic. Getting that time and getting that support. And I had already moved into, which is also currently my studio, with ample wall space. And so I just really focused on the wall work. And kind of the minute I started and was able to put some of the other tasks aside, I basically decided I'm not going back. This is it. I really want to develop this work.
And I think one of the other things we talked about together are that, Minnesota is very fortunate to have the legacy funds to support artists that many states do not, and that you've been a beneficiary of that, as so many artists have, is something that ceramic artists in a lot of other states just don't have. They don't have access to.
Oh, absolutely, yes. It literally, it makes a huge difference.
So we just want to kind of reconnect with those wall pillows that from 2010. So we know that those two pieces that the Roots purchased from Cargill Gallery were early examples of your wall installations. And can you tell us the story behind those pieces and how you kind of got to know the Roots through installing them at their home? I think here we are.
Yeah.
So there's the piece on the left that's downstairs in Cargill Gallery, and then the other piece, the black one on the right.
So the show at Cargill Gallery, which Cargill Gallery closed ultimately, they're no longer in business, but so they offered a show with the painter Alan Richmond, and it was really the first time I was able to show this work in a fine art context, and which was amazing. An amazing opportunity. And I knew Michael and Tamara through Northern Clay Center. I had worked in the exhibition program there, did installations. I was an intern there actually during grad school. And so ultimately worked. And of course, I also sold my functional parts there at Northern Clay Center. So that's how I got to know Michael and Tamara in the beginning. And I had delivered some work, I think they purchased from NCC to the house. And that's how I got to see their incredible collection. And when the show came and they came to the opening, or maybe I gave them a tour later, I can't remember. And I was absolutely thrilled, of course, when they purchased the work, because at first when I put this up, I was a little nervous how it would be received. You know, it was really showing a different side of my work, if you will, to the public. And so then they ultimately asked if I would come to their house and install it, and they had picked out they had picked out the walls and where the pieces would be. And so these little lines are actually drawn graphite. And so I had to draw on their wall in order to replicate this. And I think it took me a couple of days. And so it was great to have repeat visits and kind of get over my nervousness and really just experience their generosity and their incredible passion for the handmade object. And being in a collection like that, I mean, that just really opens so many more doors. It gives an incredible amount of validation, and it puts one's work in the context of that collection, of all the other artists, that the work they've purchased. Seeing this show down here, I mean, it's almost like every piece in there was in the slideshows when I was in art school. It's really an incredible reflection of the canon of American ceramics.
So many connections.
Yes.
So many connections. Right. Well, we may have to speed up a little bit.
I know. I'm sorry.
It's so rich. But this is a good section. So what's the most exciting thing to you now about your current work? Being able to push boundaries of size or create movement, or the changing light in modern interiors? We've got, I think, some good shots here.
Okay, so one of my favorite things is actually to tell my husband how to use the drill. So this is I have to do the shout out to my husband Mark, and who some of you know as now your yoga teacher. And so basically in terms of size, so we are test installing a commission that I received. So all my commissions are coming through the gallery I work with, which we'll talk about that gallery in just a little bit. So this is in terms of like what's exciting. I mean, size is one thing. So these are these individual wall pillows are just about the length of my arm, and which is actually funny. So when I started out, pots are about the hand and kind of almost the proportion of the face. And then as the work grows, it's like, then you see now the arm comes in, and then sculpture is kind of like the step where you step in front of it and your entire body is involved, meaning it experiences it. And that's what I love about having come to create work that is still on that kind of a level in terms of size and, not longer than my arm. And I have hit my limitation actually in terms of how big I want to make an individual piece, because of my kilns. Also, there's all slab built, so I have to be able to move this around. And I really also realized it's not bigger is better. But here's the key with this modular work. I can create, and we could actually look at the next one. I can create shapes that are large in size, but of course made of smaller elements. So this was a commission actually that was shipped ultimately to Peru. This piece will be installed on a 30-foot wall, and these are to represent the wings of a condor in flight. Condor is the national bird for Peru, and that's where I pitched it as a concept. And this is not even the whole piece that would fit on that wall. So it's actually excellent that sometimes the commissions get so big, I have to put them in several parts on 2 different walls. So yeah, so there is for sure that idea of size and really growing the work. This was one of my first pieces I put together, and then put the lighting on it, the track lighting, and cast these kinds of shadows. But there was also a point where I would hang the work either vertically or horizontally. Now, in this piece, I think that's a really, and I actually call this, well, shadow wall pillows horizon, because I created this separation of black and white that goes almost like a horizon line, you know, through the whole piece, bringing it together that way. And it took several years, actually, just working horizontal, vertical, and then we would start going to Miami to the Design Miami show, and I finally figured out, looking in the aquarium, like at School of Fish, I started thinking, what happens if I hang this diagonally? Which of course you did see in the wings earlier, kind of going a little backwards here. But so on one hand, I started really looking at the pattern of organic patterns, like School of Fish, flocks of birds, but also the man-made and the minimal architecture, again going towards, you know, completely stripped of really any ornamentation, but being form and then really highlighted through light. And so that's how I started thinking about my work between archetype and architecture. And I really liked having kind of like those 2 aspects to bring into the work. I want to stay abstract. You know, I don't want to necessarily make something where it's like, oh, this is what this is. This is a fantastic building. If you haven't been there, or next time you go to New York, go inside it and go around it.
I think we might have to speed up a little bit more.
So okay. So I
No, we've got so much more to come.
I think you can see, like with the Calatrava,
Yeah.
You know, how these kinds of influences really started translating into the work. This is also really actually interesting because the early wall pillows were all kind of like on the same plane, and now I don't know how well you can see it. These are almost a little bit in an angle. Once you start putting them in an angle, you put them in the diagonal, and then the white wall pillows have the thicker side to the bottom. The teal ones have the thicker side to the top. These are all like these little subtle elements that create a different visual picture.
It's like a weight and a counterweight kind of idea.
Yes. And it was really about introducing movement.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and this is kind of a different movement, even though here I'm going back to the you know, really having the work just horizontally. But actually, and this is really difficult to photograph, every wall pillow has a slightly different angle and a slightly different size. So there's also the idea of the succession. And I actually, for this show in New York in particular, I just really looked at spiral staircases. And whenever I could find one, I would walk up and I would try to figure out, you know, how can I, because when you look at it, or you look at a photograph of a spiral staircase, every step obviously looks slightly different. It's a
Mhm.
different dimension.
Mhm.
It's about perception.
Mhm.
So I wanted to bring that in, and so going back to your question though, so another aspect that's also really important is the viewer's point of view,
Yeah.
and how the depth comes out. I think if we go to the next one,
Mhm.
you know, sometimes, I mean, when I get an elevation, and of course all the dimensions, and sometimes pictures from a space, and then, you know, people telling me, well, I would like something like this, or they include a piece that I've done before as a reference, and then I literally create a custom commission for that space.
Mhm.
And the lighting is not up to me once I send it out, because it's really up to the client and to the designer. But I fully take into consideration where's a window, you know, how is the piece in a tight space where you see it in an angle, you know,
Mhm.
is it more, nope, you will mostly see this on a frontal view. But I wanted to include this to really, so the depth of it to me, uh, you know, just also became really important. And it's exciting because I like to think then, you know, we move through space, right? So people will always see a slightly different angle of that piece. They will always see a slightly different proportion. You know, how much space do they see between the elements? Which looks very different. I think maybe if we go to the next one.
Well, and I like this one
From
because
this
it also
side.
shows how you took the wall pillows that are downstairs and sliced them in half, kind of in a
Yeah,
way. That
yeah.
form is sort of reduced
Oh,
in
yes,
half.
yes.
Yeah,
You know,
you can
for
really
me,
tell that from here.
that's so obvious that I
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah.
didn't even
Yeah.
think to mention that. This was a really wonderful, that piece was in a show in New York, and then Architectural Digest found someone who was interested, and once it was installed, they did a big feature for the magazine. And the big condo wings you saw, that's basically, that client saw that and was like, oh, we got a 30-foot wall, let's do that.
But it also shows how well it integrates with the interior and
Yes,
the
yes.
furniture, which we'll see. I think maybe we'll kind of move ahead with the
Yes, yes,
Ruth
yes.
Duckworth mural, but because I want to show some of the
Yes.
gallery shots
Yes,
where we
yes.
see more of that. So
Yeah.
this question really was about kind of dealing with, you know, these forms and shadows, and you're already seeing some correlations between this, and this piece is not on view, but it is the piece that Mia commissioned from Ruth Duckworth.
And it totally
when we had
influenced
the
me,
show.
and we can go quickly through it. I
There's some
wanted to
details.
say, for example, so to me, this was like a vertical landscape, and this was really right about the time when I was just trying to push through getting those forms on the wall, and, you know, just figuring it out technically. And what's interesting is, so these quote unquote tiles, the way Ruth would work, there's hardly any space in between, but the space that is there becomes a line, almost like my little cutouts.
Yeah.
And so if you want to go further, so for me, it was basically like, wait a minute, you know, I really want more depth in this, and I really want to get into that negative space I've been obsessed with since I was in foundations in Kansas City. So yeah, so putting a piece on a white wall, you know, I love how the shadows just kind of become their own color. And then of course here's the same piece on a very specific picked teal color, because, you know, just the way then the juxtaposition works, and really how the negative space of these individual forms is highlighted. And can I just say, so if the two on the bottom right here, if you would put these two together, they are one big pillow.
It's like your table pillow.
And yes, and that's why it's called wall pillow fragments, because I first make it and then I start cutting it apart and basically filling in all the little areas that, you know, were open initially. Yeah, and so here the you know, the shadows to me are just really they're making space visible. And what's amazing is that, I mean, the light is such a wonderful tool. This is obviously specifically lit with track lighting, but you know, these forms respond because they're so three-dimensional. They really respond. So they're coming out quite a bit further than the piece down here. And so that's also why they create different shadow, obviously. And so, you know, this work responds to any kind of light condition. Indirect, is it sunlight? You know, maybe someone has a great window and there's a full moon. It's just like that. The light quality changes all the time. If you have a direct light or not. I mean, a direct, you know, track lighting. So I realized that is such a wonderful aspect of the work that is an ever-changing aspect.
Okay. Well, I did want to talk about, again, we're coming up on time, but I think this is an important question just because of the field, thinking about the field and gallery representation. And so your move to abstract ceramic wall sculpture coincided with representation from the relatively new craft and design gallery, Hostler Burroughs in New York City, which now has 2 gallery spaces in New York and 1 in LA. And I followed them for some time because they combine vintage Scandinavian design, furniture, et cetera, and studio ceramics, including Nordic artists like Christina Riska and Kati Tuomainen-Niitila, who are both ceramic artists from Finland that we have in Mia's collection. And Kim Hostler and Juliette Burroughs really not only helped redefine where contemporary studio craft belongs after the dissolution of many media-based galleries, but they also broadened your context and significance internationally. And so I just want to ask what initially drew them to your work, and how can you describe your relationship with them today? So here's some design shots from Design Miami.
You know, it was just really, I don't know, impeccable timing, a lucky overlay. There was a local antique dealer who did art fairs with Kim Hostler and Juliette Burroughs, which are life and business partners. And so they would meet at art fairs, and they told him that they were doing a Nordic women's ceramic show in their gallery in New York. They were moving away from vintage and antique forms and incorporating more contemporary. And so I think it was Michael Birdsall who said, "Hey, wait a minute, do you know Maren Kloppmann's work?" And they were like, "No." So they exchanged, and when I ran into him, he said, "Did you ever hear from them?" And I said, "No." And he said, "You should contact them." So I did. And so they did invite me for that Nordic women ceramic show. And there was all artists from Scandinavia. Now, I'm not Scandinavian, but I think Northern Germany, I think that there was a kind of like a kinship in my work. So yes, actually, yeah.
The Finnish artists that we have in our collection.
That's right. Yeah. So Christina was actually in that original show that we did in New York. But ultimately, I sent them a wall piece, and so Kim and Juliette invited me to make a piece for Design Miami. So that was the first slide we saw. And make a piece for the title wall. And if you saw that, if you think you saw that earlier, that was the first bigger wall piece I made with that State Arts Board grant. So that whole timing, it just all came together.
Yeah, if you hadn't had the grant start working on it. You wouldn't have had something
I-
ready for Design Miami.
Absolutely.
So the timing was really
yes.
fortuitous.
Yeah, and Mark and I went down there together to Miami. We installed the piece. We met the gallerists. We instantly connected, and still while we were down there in this design show going on, they offered an exclusive representation. Now, really briefly, I mean, that's how it used to be when I was in Kansas City, and this is all pre-internet. It was like, develop your work, find your gallery, and they will define your career. And by the time I graduated from the UFM, you know, the internet had started, artists were putting up their own websites, the galleries were changing because there was suddenly a different need or picture of representation. So that was actually, I mean, for me, that was quite disappointing. So when this happened, and you know, besides the fact, I mean, putting this work in the kind of a design context, I was so happy when we went down there. We installed the piece. I literally thought, this is my new world. This is the world I want to be in. It just really changed the way I was perceiving the work, the way I was thinking about the work. And I loved having you know, these other international artists in this roster, and that, you know, we would sometimes meet at a show, or you know, read or hear about each other. So they the first Design Miami was in 2014. And so just imagine, it was 18 years after I graduated from the UFM. And so there was plenty of time of maturity. And I just think that the timing of me finding them and them finding me, and being at this point of the development, was just impeccable timing. It just, everything just kind of clicked in together. So this has really defined my career, and to where it has developed. So yeah, in 2019, they offered me a solo show in their New York gallery. So this is a space that's 3,000 square feet, and so they do solo shows. They often have it set up basically with their roster of artists, which I want to say is between 25 or 30 different artists. So for example, these tables, Cargill Gallery, he's in Israel. They're amazing. They're huge. So they actually incorporated some of his tables that then with my show, because there's so much kinship and overlap between, there's really a correspondence between our works. And so for this show, which was really awesome, they just gave me the whole space. I ended up building an architectural model, because I really wanted to integrate the architecture of the space, and consider how what would the viewers see walking in. What does the viewer see when he turns this angle and this angle with the columns inside? What do you see in between spaces? What do you see when you're at the end of the gallery and turn back and look back out? Mm-hmm. So it was an incredible opportunity to develop this work. And again, it was just such a springboard for me to even dig deeper.
Well, I know we have a couple more slides. We'll keep them in our back pocket because we are over time. I want to respect that from everybody. But if folks want to stay for a few questions, I think this is a good opportunity. Anna has a microphone over there, so we prefer that you ask your question with a microphone. So if anybody has a question, please raise your hand and she'll bring it by. Oh, Tamara has one in the front.
Maren, this is only tangentially related to your work, but it's a question that has bothered me for years. Michael and I, in our collecting, depended not only on Michael's research, but also on very knowledgeable gallerists, very knowledgeable dealers. And the decline of the gallery is a serious concern of mine. And I wonder what you think, what you hope for, and Jennifer, of course, who's more knowledgeable about this too. Could you both speak to what I see is a great problem for contemporary craft artists?
Well, I think, and that's a really good question, because, you know, a lot of people who collected kind of when you all started were working with galleries that were very material based. And it isn't to say that there aren't opportunities like that. And I do want to, you know, put in a plug for Northern Clay Center, which still has a great representation of clay artists and, you know, is a center for so many aspects of clay art. But I think Hostler Burroughs is one of those examples where the kind of craft community started to reinvent itself a little bit and intersect with different other areas of representation, like in this case, the vintage, you know, Scandinavian furniture, which has such an affinity with, you know, this larger scale sculptural clay art. And so for me, it's like a great marriage. And you see a lot of these galleries now at Design Miami and other venues that are putting together, you know, not only artists from very different parts of the world, like they do, but that have some kind of visual correlation, but also with different types of materials. So I don't know if you can speak further to that, but I think the artists are still out there, you know. It's just and Maren was in the right place at the right time to really be kind of integrated into this, in a way, second or third generation of representation that that is thriving. It's just not necessarily speaking only to collectors in one media. But I think that's okay, because people who are looking for works for an interior might be buying multiple types of objects from Hostler Burroughs. They're not just buying a ceramic work. They might be looking to them for you know, more of an interior, like a unified interior. So I think the ways in which people are collecting are also different.
And I think the only other thing I just wanted to add to that is, you know, it really puts the work into a different context, and it blurs between design, art, and craft. And I see more of a trend going in that direction, especially with these design shows. I mean, there's still a, you know, obviously a big difference and division of what is being shown at Art Basel, for example. But you know, even like the salon in New York, or TIFAF show coming out of the Netherlands, you know, they are really, or even the expo in Chicago, they're really putting fine art design, what used to be just craft, and creating a different context. And I think I hear you, Tamara, and I think this is maybe also cyclical. I think that maybe just needs to develop another generation of gallerists that then will be maybe media specific again.
Yeah. I see a question back there.
Hi, Jennifer, Jeanette Clouder.
Hi, Jeanette.
Wonderful, all of this. I have a question for you in terms of when you make these, do you have a set of drawings that you do first for this? Or are these just something where you create the pillows and then you do an assemblage afterward? What's your process?
I actually work with, well, the next slide could work.
Oh, yeah. This way we have these in our back pocket.
Go one more.
This one, yeah.
So you see those black shapes on the wall there in the center? Those are actually flat, that's cardboard. So I developed a kind of a repertoire of different types of wall pillows, and I make essentially, so they're three-dimensional on the wall, but they have a footprint, right? A shape. And so I created a lot of these footprints out of black cardboard, foam core, actually not cardboard, foam core. And so when I design a new piece, I start out with that. So it's first it's two-dimensional. And then I trace that onto paper. And what you actually see is ultimately the map where all the cleats go. And then you have a corresponding piece that you hang on the cleat. And what's actually great, I didn't even include that intentionally. The oval that's hanging, and that's a really dark blue navy glaze, is the template on the table is actually for that piece. So it really is. I mean, I had to figure out a process. So with your piece, I don't know if you remember that we didn't have a template. I didn't start out that way, and so I literally, I would measure, and I had little notes. And I mean, that was one of the first times when I took a piece down in a gallery and hung it in someone's home. And you don't want to drill too many holes, before it's actually, oh, that's the one. So I ultimately developed this method of creating a map, essentially. And that's what's being sent out with all the hardware. And the forms. So no, I didn't get to go to Peru. I didn't get to go to Australia. I mean, I have works in quite a few different countries now, and it would be great to go there, but it also takes obviously a lot of time. So this is a really great way of creating a piece and then sending it, and the client would hire an art installer to put it up. But
Yeah.
there are no like mishaps, or like it could be. This is rock solid.
Yeah, and you didn't have to install your piece here either, because we have art installers.
No, yes.
Yay. All right. Any other questions? All right, well, I realize we have gone over time, but I hope you've all enjoyed hearing about Maren's work in the context of the exhibition and the collection. And I do encourage you to see the show in Cargill, as well as Andreas's show of the Japanese ceramics from the Root collection, which is just over to the left as you exit from Pillsbury. So thank you, Maren.